Well, people, My Adventure with Superman has now officially arrived. We got our 2-episode premiere technically this morning because it came out at midnight, which is very much not ideal, but the show is on Adult Swim, which, again, I don't know why they wouldn't put this on Cartoon Network or HBO Max like it was originally supposed to be, because it's not an Adult Swim show. It's very much family-friendly and, kid-appropriate, but also, us adults and, older audiences will appreciate this show as well. So it doesn't need to be on Adult Swim. It doesn't need to be dropping these episodes at midnight because that's not fun. But luckily, I just so happened to be up at that hour. So I was like, you know what? I'll check it out. And this was a show that I didn't know how to feel about it going into this. Because, I was excited for it because I was like, man, this is great. We finally get a new Superman animated series. We haven't had a Superman cartoon from Superman the Animated Series back in, I think, the 90s. So it's good to have a new Superman cartoon. And also, just superhero cartoons aren't really a thing anymore. It wasn't really even super big when I was growing up either in the 2010s. But there were still some things that I had. The Saturday morning cartoon, that was the thing when you're a kid. And I had at least a version of that growing up. But now, when I look at what kids have to watch nowadays, you don't get those Saturday morning cartoons anymore. Not only do they not really make cartoons like that anymore, most of these, new cartoons and, just kids' TV shows, new episodes will come out at night, which is weird. But this show reminded me of, those classic Saturday morning cartoons, waking up early, or in this case, staying up late to watch the new episode of My Adventure with Superman. That's really exciting. And especially, again, in a world where we don't really get many superhero cartoons anymore because, Marvel, they're putting all their focus on the MCU. DC, same thing with the DCU. And we know that we're going to be getting new animated series with DC and stuff, but that's going to be more adult-oriented. Harley Quinn has been great and everything, but it's really nice to go back to having just a kid's cartoon about these DC Comics characters. I think that is really, really awesome. And something I really appreciate about this idea, and also gets me really excited for when Batman Cape Crusader eventually does come out, which is going to be on Prime Video. But my big hesitation going into this was the animation style. Now, I'm not one to really hate on stuff before I actually watch it, but just looking at these first look photos, personally, this is just my personal opinion. I'm not hugely into anime. I don't really enjoy that style of animation. So that was one of my hesitations going into this, oh, a Superman anime, I don't know how I'm going to feel about that. But I've made exceptions before. I love the Teen Titans cartoon from the early 2000s. That's an anime style cartoon, but I still really enjoy it. And this is another show where I'll make the exception because it works for this. It actually makes it quite interesting from what we've seen before with Superman in animation. Because anime is a very unique style, and I think something like this with superpowers is particularly with Superman, it comes across really unique compared to what we've seen from Superman in the past, which I actually really quite enjoy here. So yeah, that aspect was actually really cool. Now, like I said, it was a 2-episode premiere, so it's a 2-part episode thing, where it's basically the origin of Superman, origin of Superman. So you get some flashbacks to when Clark was a little kid, when he first discovered that he was an alien. You get Ma and Pa Ken, all that good stuff. And that's just a couple moments. And they do it in a way that's very similar and very reminiscent of what we've seen in the comics and other cartoons and other past iterations of Superman in media. But it also puts its own spin on it, again, because, you have that kind of anime style to it. Makes it pretty creatively interesting. The other thing I really want to compare this to is Invincible, which Invincible is a show that I love. The animation style here is very similar to that, and that was one of the things that gave me more hope going into this. I was like, man, I loved Invincible, which, by the way, cannot wait for Invincible Season 2 coming later this year, but if this is like Invincible, then I'll be really happy with it. And that is the biggest thing. My biggest takeaway from watching these first 2 episodes, it feels like Invincible in the best way possible. It feels like Invincible, but with Superman. And, you know, one of the biggest complaints about Superman over the last couple years is that we need a brighter, more hopeful look at Superman. Because, you know, obviously we've had the Henry Cavill Superman, which I love Henry Cavill's Superman, but it's definitely a darker take on the character. Even we have Tyler Hoechlin's Superman on Superman and Lois, which is a great version of the character, but still, it is a bit darker, not as bright and hopeful. So I enjoy seeing this, just a happy, innocent Superman, especially, you know, a younger Superman who's just starting off. You know, also because he is just starting off, he's going through that learning curve. So one of the things that's always hard about Superman when you're writing the character is Superman is such a powerful character. How do you have him fight these villains and not just be completely overpowered? Well, that's kind of one of the brilliances of having this be Superman starting out his careers, because he's still new to this. He's still learning how to use his powers. So that's when a smaller, low-level villain like Livewire, as we see in these first couple episodes, can punch him and can like actually hurt him and stuff. It's because he's not experienced yet. It's because he's not fully the Man of Steel. So I do really appreciate that. Also, speaking of Livewire, when it comes to the villains, the interesting thing about this show is it's been said Lex Luthor is not going to be in this first season, which I think is a great idea, because obviously, you know, Lex Luthor is kind of synonymous with Superman. Like, usually you do Superman, you're going to do Lex Luthor at least eventually. And they probably will, maybe in a season 2, 3, whatever it may be. But I appreciate that, again, we're going for something different here. You know, pretty much over the past couple years, when it comes to Superman, he's been fighting Lex Luthor, Zod, and Brainiac. Like, the big guns. So I appreciate that this show is bringing it down to a lower scale level with, again, a character like Livewire, Silver Banshee, Parasite. I believe Toyman's going to be in the show. Like, there's a lot of really cool, smaller, low-level Superman villains that I really, really love. But the only time I've really ever seen them is in the original Superman the Animated Series. So to see them brought to life here is really interesting. And obviously they're very different and very unique compared to what we've seen in the past. And that is one thing that, you know, with the whole anime style, it is really cool for action sequences specifically. But, you know, a character like Livewire, again, who I'm just going to specifically reference that villain because we actually see her in these first couple episodes. She has a very anime style design that it looks nothing like she does in the comics, until there's a point where she gets a very fairly comics accurate look for a moment, and it's really interesting. And just like the world they're setting up here, because there's been reports about some of the different villains that are going to be in the show, and like not all of them are Superman villains. Like, you got characters like Deathstroke and the Brain and Monsieur Mala and Heatwave that are going to be in here, which is weird. Like Suicide Squad and Task Force X, that's interesting, but I really love it. I really, really like that idea. So I think that's great. And kind of the interesting thing about the show is, you know, every time you see Superman is different, but most of the time the focus is put on Superman. But there's a reason this show is called My Adventures with Superman. It's almost like the title of the show. This show is from the perspective of somebody else. And that somebody else is Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen, because this isn't just a Superman show. This show is really about the trio. It's about all three of them. You know, Clark is learning about himself and revealing himself to the world as this Superman. Meanwhile, he's an intern at the Daily Planet with Lois and Jimmy, and you know, they're trying to hunt down and uncover who this mysterious Superman is and everything. And I really enjoy that. And of course, at the core, you have that romance, that blossoming relationship between Clark and Lois, which is adorable. I love their dynamic so far. It's very quirky, as it should be. So I really enjoy that. The only thing I can hope for, you know, one of my favorite things about the relationship between Clark and Lois is I hope that at least at some point Lois starts calling him Smallville, because that is a staple, specifically going back to the good old days with Smallville. Man, I love that show. But yeah, this show is great. Jack Quaid is amazing as Clark Kent Superman. Again, a more brightful, uplifting, hopeful Superman. I really enjoyed it. And again, it's unfortunate that I'm going to have to stay up till midnight to watch these episodes every week. But we get new episodes every Thursday at midnight. Or, today's Friday. But, yeah, so it's like midnight of Thursday night. Technically Friday morning. I don't know, it's complicated, way more complicated than it needs to be, but of course, if you haven't seen the episode yet, the episodes will be streaming on HBO Max the day after, so that'll be tomorrow on July 8th. So look forward to that if you haven't seen it yet. Again, if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. It's a really good show, especially if you like the character of Superman. And I'm really looking forward to seeing more of this series going forward in the next couple weeks. So anyways, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about My Adventures of Superman? Again, we just got this 2-episode premiere. What do you think about this version of the characters, of this story? Do you have any thoughts, theories, or predictions? And who is your favorite Superman? So anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching. Please drop a like if you enjoyed this video and hit the subscribe button so I can keep you up to date on everything goes on in the DC life.